Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And one of our objectives now, based on largely on employee feedback, is trying to demystify the pay pool process, help people better understand how this pay pools work and how they are impacted by them. So we've got a great group today to discuss these factors. But before we do, we want to go around and meet everybody. And we will start with Mr. Fredericks.
Hi, this is Tom Fredericks. I'm the Deputy Director in the 66th Air Base Group at Hanscom. And my experience with ACQ Demo has been since we started back in 2016. I've been a pay pool panel member, and I've also worked very closely with the pay pool administrator and the pay pool manager to prepare and to work through the process throughout the year. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Leek.
Hey, Chris Leek. I'm the Director of the Acquisition Excellence and Program Execution Directorate. I've been a pay pool manager for the last 2 cycles, so I have a lot of experience with managing at the very top level and overseeing the execution of the ACQ Demo process.
Sure. Ms. Sowers.
Hi, I'm Kathy Sowers, the Director of Finance for our Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, and I've been the pay pool manager since the inception of ACQ Demo, so going on 4 years. And so I have experience working with all the sub-pay pool managers, the administrator, as well as the ins and outs of the actual pay pool. So, looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Falcone.
Hi, my name's Steve Falcone. I'm the Director of Engineering for PEO Digital, also known as LCMCHB, and I'm the organizational senior functional for both the engineers and the CARS IT, which are the 2210s. I am a pay pool manager and a sub-pay pool manager. Pay pool manager on the engineering side and sub-pay pool manager on the CARS IT side.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Conley.
Hi, I'm Lance Conley. I'm the Director of Logistics for Lifecycle Management Center. And I've been a sub-pay pool manager, and then last year was my first time as a pay pool manager. So a fair amount of experience with this, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Hello, I'm Tom Fisher, the Director of Engineering for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. I get the honor of being the Chief Functional for a large number of pay pools in LCMC. So I get to operate my own pay pool, but also get to look across at all the pay pools within engineering. I've been a sub-pay pool member and manager, as also as a pay pool leader. And so I've been involved in the ACQ Demo since the beginning.
Sir. Ms. Artuso.
Hi, I'm the Director of Personnel here at LCMC, and my organization, LCMC DP, administers and facilitates the entire ACQ Demo program. And specifically, I am the pay pool manager for the DP pay pool. So I oversee the process for that particular pay pool. Small enough to where we don't need sub-pay pools, so my job might be a little bit easier per se than what Mr. Fisher described. So I too am looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Moore?
Hi, my name is Maura Moore. I am the program manager for LCMC with the Acquisition Demonstration Project program. I have worked in other demonstration projects to include the laboratory demonstration project. So I am more of on the administration side of the program, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And Mr. Leingang.
Hello, Greg Leingang. I'm the Vice Director of the 88th Air Base Wing. I'm the pay pool manager of the 88th Air Base Wing, and for several years prior to this, I was a sub-pay pool manager supporting the administration of the LCMC FM pay pool supporting Ms. Sowers. So happy to be part of the conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you. And again, welcome everybody. we're really excited to get started. And so let's get started with Ms. Artuso. Can you explain to us, just give us an idea, why does the pay pool exist and what is the pay pool process used for?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to talk to the audience today about ACT Demo and specifically the pay pool process. Really, the pay pool process is designed to be fair and equitable across the members of that particular pay pool. It's a structured group review process that essentially assesses the employee's contribution to the mission and the quality of their performance. We use pay pool panels to ensure that individual supervisor, the rating of that particular employee are reviewed by his or her peers. In other words, by other raters that's in that particular pay pool. And then ultimately by the pay pool manager. The pay pool manager is the one who has the decision authority over that particular entity. The rated employees, again, just to ensure that there's a fair and a transparent focus on evaluating and assessing employees' contribution to the mission. That the employees are rank ordered really by the entire pay pool panel. The intent is not so much to require this ranking, but to ensure that any inflation or deflation in ratings are identified, and that way they can be corrected throughout the normal operation of the pay pool. So, and as I mentioned, the pay pool manager is the final person of the authority to make those final decision is normally at the higher end of the organizational structure. So they've got really good oversight into their sub pay pool panel members, what that process was, how that process was used to get to the employees in this pay pool to see and really reconcile their categorical scores, their numerical scores, and their rating of record that we know as pay quills. So that in essence is what the pay pool is structured to do. And in LCMC, we ensure that the right people are on these panels just to make sure that the employee, their voice, their assessment is heard and can be fairly evaluated.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Connolly.
Right. So, in addition to what Sherry said, I think what's important to understand is that the value and the benefit of the pay pool is that it really helps normalize ratings across the pay pool. So, individual supervisors have variable views of how they evaluate contributions. And so what the importance, and I think one of the beauties of this situation with the pay pools is that you get a peer grouping together to look at those rank orderings, to look at contribution scores, to make sure that we don't allow the system to get out of kilter, so to speak. So we kind of make sure that nobody's way high and somebody else is way low. And I think that's one of the real values of the pay pool. Thank you.
Thank you. So when the pay pool process occurs, what are the events that are leading up to that? Ms. Moore, can you talk to that?
Sure. So the pay pool process occurs after the end of the assessment cycle. So in ACT Demo, the assessment cycle starts on 1 October and then goes through 30 September of the following year. So within that year time frame, there are 3 major milestones that have to be met by the supervisor and the employee. These are the mandatory feedback sessions. 2 occur before the pay pool process, and then 1 occurs after the pay pool process. So if you're looking at someone that was in ACT Demo at the beginning of the cycle, the first part of the cycle, which again begins on 1 October, you'll have what you call the contribution plan feedback session. And this kind of starts the ball rolling as far as what the expectations are for the employee to start within the cycle, the contribution plans, what are their goals. And then you go into the April-May timeframe, which is when the midpoint review is to be held between the supervisor and the employee. So if there is an employee who starts after the first of the cycle, within 30 days, that contribution plan needs to be completed. And then whatever that midpoint cycle is, whatever that true midpoint is, that's when the midpoint cycle feedback session should occur for that employee. So those are the two feedback sessions that lead up to the pay-pool process. And then after 30 September, the cycle is completed. Then starts the pay-pool process, which typically is from 1 October to maybe mid-December, depending on the size of the pay-pool, you know, the complexities of getting everyone on board at the same time for the schedules to meet with the sub-pay-pools, and then that final pay-pool level meeting. And then that completes the pay-pool process. And everything has to be completed and signed off and approved by the pay-pool manager in time for the payout come after the first of the new year. So you have two feedback sessions that are mandatory that occurs before the pay-pool process, and then one after. So after payout, then the supervisor can sit down and talk to the employee about the results of the pay-pool process. So while there are three, that by no means mean the supervisor and employee are relegated to those three. ACT Demo is a dynamic personnel system, and they can have more than just those three mandatory feedbacks. It can be monthly, quarterly, bi-weekly, whatever works for them, just as long as it's meaningful. That's really the foundation behind the feedback sessions in ACT Demo.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fisher.
I think it's so important that ACT Demo provides just a great opportunity for meaningful feedback throughout the year. The milestones are really important because then they put you in a position to document perhaps what your contribution plan is, but also that midterm feedback, and then final, of course. But it also, with all the modern tools we have, there's a lot more opportunity for meaningful feedback using all the various elements that are part of the ACT Demo system. Really understand contributions and how they impact the mission. So I think it's really important that everyone understands that that while there's milestones in the process, it's designed for meaningful feedback.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, sir. And Mr. Leake.
Hey, I just want to build off what Mara and Mr. Fisher said. Feedback is a really important part of the ACT Demo system. And we need to make sure that that feedback is not just a one-way communication from the supervisor to the employee. It really should be a dynamic discussion between the employee and the supervisor, with the employee providing what their career objectives are, their interests and challenges in the job are, and then receiving from the supervisor feedback and assistance on how to really be able to provide an effective contribution to the mission goals of the organization. Because again, the feedback is great, the objectives and the goals are great, but it's all got to trace back to what is the mission of the organization and how are the contributions of the employee aligned to that.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Falcone.
Yeah, just to add to what Chris just said, I would also add that those feedback sessions are an opportunity for the employee to also say, hey, I need help. You know, I've got a lot of things in my contribution plan that I either don't have the skill or I don't know where to go. And don't wait till the end of the cycle for that discussion to happen, because then it's too late. It has to happen early on. And you don't have to wait for the midterm, but a midterm's a good time to really reflect on what those things are. Over.
Thank you. So we've talked about the cycle. Let's kind of go back and let's walk through this methodically and look at the first step in the cycle. So what milestone really gets the whole thing kicked off? We'll go with Mr. Fredericks.
Hi. Hi. So the cycle starts with contribution planning, and that's key part of the cycle. The supervisor will go over the organizational mission, position information, expected contribution, and talk about the overall contribution score that'll be expected as well in the range. This is a good step with the conversation starting throughout the process. And it's important to make sure that both sides, the employee and the supervisor, are communicating their needs, their expectations, and making sure that it's clear communication. I think the key element here that we need to focus on is tying it to organizational goals, because this is all about contribution to the mission. So that contribution plan needs to show what can that employee do to make the most impactful contributions to the mission at the highest possible level. Thanks.
Ms. Sowers, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, sure, Daryl. I agree. The contribution plan at the very beginning, it's the time where you sit down and walk through what it is the expectation is with you and the employee. And as has already been mentioned, it's a good opportunity then for them to understand how those contributions tie to the mission. Because one of the issues we've had over 4 years in ACT Demo is people trying to make the separation between this is a contribution system versus a performance system. So it's very important for the supervisors and the employees to talk about what is the contribution to the mission and how does that differ from the way it used to be where it was based on performance. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Connolly.
Yeah, so what I really like about the contribution planning is that I think sometimes we all get into this rut where we're not quite sure what we need to be doing. And so this contribution planning really kind of gives the employee an anchor to say, okay, what do I need to be doing? And it also gives the employee an opportunity to say, hey, you know, I understand where the mission is and where the organization wants to go. And I have these unique talents, and I think I can tie in and contribute to the mission using these talents. And this is exactly what I want to accomplish during this year. So when the supervisor and employee do that, I think it makes a great anchor for the coming year, and at least up through the midpoint and any adjustments that need to be made. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Moore.
I just wanted to add to kind of going back to the dynamic system of ACT Demo. At any time, if the mission changes, if anything changes where the supervisor or the employee thinks they need to make some tweaks to the contribution plan at any time during the cycle, they can go ahead and do that. It would be the same process, but it is a dynamic tool, so they can revisit that if should anything change throughout the cycle. Over.
Thank you. Mr. Langang.
Yeah, you know, for, gosh, many years now, individual development plans or IDPs have been something that supervisors and employees work on together, you know, just as an opportunity for that employee to try to document near-term goals, longer-term goals for their career. And I think there's a neat intersection with the development of an IDP and the contribution plan, and really even our career path models that have been put in place this year instead of the tiering system. You know, all of those things tend to be mentoring type discussions. And I think when ACT Demo is done well, that's really what the contribution planning discussion ends up being, is a mentoring discussion between the supervisor and the employee to understand what are the employee's individual development plan goals, how do they intersect with the organizational goals, what can that employee do to develop themselves and contribute to the mission, and then seek that higher level of responsibility that they might be looking for. And obviously that's an avenue then to increase compensation as well.
So moving forward through the cycle, what is the next milestone that we run across? Ms. Moore, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So the next milestone is that midpoint review, and this is really a great opportunity. Number one, this is really the first opportunity that the employee gets to write contribution inputs on their contributions up to that point in the cycle. So while it's not mandatory, it is highly, highly encouraged, because what we always tell employees, don't assume your supervisor knows everything what you did, or to the extent something had to get done. So this is the point in the process where the employee can submit inputs. We recommend always the contribution result impact format, otherwise known as the CRI format, where the employee writes contribution, what did they do, the result, what were the results, and most importantly, what the impact was to the mission. And so that's their opportunity to kind of have their voice in the process, to make sure their supervisor knows what he or she did. And then the supervisor will write their own assessment on the employee. And then they'll sit down and they'll have a conversation, and they'll have, and this is one of those mandatory feedback sessions. So they'll sit down, have a talk. Where are you? How are you doing? Are we meeting your goals? If there's any issues at this point, this is the time to have that conversation if it wasn't done beforehand, if there's any kind of contribution concerns. If there are contribution concerns, it's always best for the supervisor to maybe touch base with their employee management relations specialist or their labor management relations specialist, just to say, hey, I'm noticing some slipping. What do I need to do? But this is really that time in the cycle for that, any kind of course correction, or to let them know that, hey, you're meeting your goals, you're doing a great job, keep it up. This is how we can make it even better. It's just that point in the process, and that midpoint in the process, to have that, again, that meaningful conversation, to have that meaningful feedback. So towards the latter half of the cycle, the employee knows what he or she has to do. Over.
Thank you. And Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, I think the midpoint review is really important because of, I use this year as an example when things just dramatically change during the year. So it's not just, so the mission of the organization can fundamentally change. And so what might have been a major project for an individual might now become a minor project. And perhaps then that could be de-emphasized in someone's and how they approach their work. And so that's a great time to have that communication. And what I've seen is the strength of ACT Demo, but also what has been one of our weaknesses in the past is not having those good communications. So this midpoint review is so important because that's when those adjustments can be made so that expectations of the organization and of the employee can be, again, another opportunity to make sure they're meshed well. Because the dynamics of our mission change so much that as I said before, something that was really major, I was really working hard on it, may not be as important. We might want to, de-emphasize that and emphasize something else. So let's make sure that the employee understands that any of those contributions and those results really have the impact that they were thinking they would.
Mr. Connolly.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the strengths of ACT Demo is this, it's kind of that set time to have that midterm feedback. And it's so important too, because you can't get to the end of the cycle and then say, hey, my employee performed poorly, and you never told them about it, never gave them an opportunity to correct their contribution efforts. So that dialogue is very, very important. On the employee side too, kind of what Mr. Fisher was saying, there may be things that change, or there may be things that the employee needs to be successful. Maybe it's training, maybe it's resources. And that's the opportunity for the employee to tell the supervisor, this is what I plan to do, but I can't get there because I need these things. And then they can come together and figure out how they're going to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone.
Yeah, just 2 points. I think that's a great opportunity, like Mr. Fisher said, to look at that contribution plan and see if that has to change because something's happened in the last 6 months. The other thing I really want to emphasize is the employee, while they're not required to do a self-assessment, can do a self-assessment. It does 2 things. One, look at the factor descriptors and discriminators. Make sure you're in line with those. If not, what could you do better? It gives you the opportunity to categorize the first 6 months so you don't have to wait till the end of the year and forget half the stuff you did. And then the third thing it really does is it's that communications path between you and the supervisor that, like somebody else said, is the supervisor may not know all the things you're doing. They get the top, you know, the wave tops, but it's your chance to really tell them everything you've been doing. Over.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Leake.
So I think like all the other speakers, the important thing to remember about the midterm is not that it's an event to check a block. It's not a writing exercise. It's an opportunity for rich communication. That communication starts with the employee writing their contributions to clearly provide the supervisor with insight in what they're doing, and frankly, help the employees structure their thoughts on what is the focus in their job right now. It gives the supervisor a chance to review that against the goals, against the organizational missions, and as Mr. Fisher said, against changes that may have occurred to ensure that the employees' actions are well understood, well aligned with the contributions, and still aligned with the contribution or the mission of the organization, and allows that common understanding for both appreciation for the contributions as well as an understanding of what help may be needed and what changes may be made because of misunderstandings of requirements or changes in the organizational structure. So it is really that rich communication that needs to be focused on.
Thanks, sir. So that takes us to the end of the cycle assessments, and then we start into the first step of the CCAS process. So let's go ahead and take that step forward and talk about that now. Ms. Sowers?
Sure. So when we get to the end of the ACT demo cycle and we're starting the appraisal cycle, it's really important that the employees, they're the first step. They'll be asked to provide their input describing what they've done, over the last year. We have three factors that we ask folks to evaluate themselves against: achievement and innovation, teamwork and communication, and then finally the mission support. So it's important, again, as Maura mentioned earlier, try to write that in the CRI format. It's not required, but it helps the panels understand what was the context, what was the result, and what was the impact. And then once they're completed with their self-assessment for the year, they'll forward that on to their supervisor, who then will read through what the employee has said their contributions are, and then the supervisor will add their feedback and their write-up for the appraisal. And they'll be looking at the factor descriptors and the discriminators for the various broadbands that the employees are in, as well as the factor descriptors that we just mentioned. They'll also assign a categorical score depending on where they are within the standard pay line and their broadband. And we also have this thing called the PayQuil, which is the performance appraisal quality level that we assess to our employees that serves the purpose of, in case we were to have a RIF, since we are a contribution-based system, we have to have something for that purposes. So the PayQuil is used in the case of a RIF, and that will also be assigned by the supervisors. But again, it's what we see at the pay pool and the sub-pay pool levels is it's really, really important that these write-ups be clear and concise and direct. And over 4 years of being in the system, they've gotten a lot better. Everybody has understanding how that process should be working. It's not a writing contest. It doesn't gonna give you a better score if you have 25 pages of write-up versus if you have 3 very concise pages that talk about your contributions in the system. So over.
Thank you. Mr. Fredericks.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things to what Ms. Sowers had to say. The self-assessment isn't just, or it shouldn't just be, fill it out and send it to your supervisor. You know, that can also be a little bit of a back and forth, a conversation, a communication. This is what I'm looking at. Have I forgotten anything? Am I really emphasizing what the results are and what the impact are? Because a lot of people get that confused. You need to make sure that you're emphasizing hard-hitting impacts to the mission. The other piece that I wanted to mention was that the supervisors need to make sure that they're not just taking what's in the self-assessment and regurgitating that. It's really important for the supervisors to look at the whole picture for the whole 12 months. Hopefully there have been 12 months worth of conversations. Hopefully you've made some notes along the way. And so you can make a more concise, hard-hitting demonstration of what the impact to the mission your employee has made. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Leek.
So I just wanted to again, build on what has already been said on the importance of the employee input, especially those impacts. The emphasis should be on short, hard-hitting impact statements that trace through the contribution goals to the mission impact. We see a lot of write-ups that have a lot of descriptors in the C and the R, but it's really that I, that impact. Short, hard-hitting bullets that trace back make a lot of difference. And those have a huge impact all the way through the assessment process. So it's really important for the employees to get good impact statements documented as part of their self-assessment.
Thank you. So then our next step moving forward would be going towards the sub-pay pools. So let's talk a little bit about that. Ms. Artuso.
Yeah, I also wanted to make a point earlier when the employees are writing, whether it's their midterm or their annual assessment, I find it easier to track everything that I've done through the year if I do it throughout the year instead of just waiting at that 6-month point or at the end there. So because I view the contribution plan as sort of a guide. So it's like, okay, this is what I set out to do, you know, and it's almost a reminder to keep yourself on track, you know, to accomplish what you set out to do. So I think documenting what you've done throughout the year certainly helps. And also from the supervisory perspective, when they're writing their assessment, make sure that, of course, take into account what the employee puts in, as well as what you've observed, but also reach out to IPT leads as an example, because in our current structure, there might be, you know, your personal observations, as well as a lead of a particular, you know, program office. You know, maybe somebody is a matrix. So always good to get a whole viewpoint of what the employee has done through the year. So with that, when the assessments are written, the numerical score, categorical score, and the pay will, that's where if a pay pool is structured as such to where it has a sub pay pool, that's kind of that next step. So the sub pay pool is, you know, has certain employees grouped in it. And that's the similar to really the larger pay pool. It's just a little more manageable, more detailed, to where the first line supervisor, as well as the second level supervisor, who oftentimes is that sub pay pool manager, can look at a smaller group of people and do the assessment, that peer-to-peer assessment, and really go through that normalization process. And if there are any questions about a write-up or a particular score, it's you know, right there in that process to where the supervisor may be asked to clarify and, you know, come to a consensus at this point in time, before then the records and the follow-on review process takes place at the main pay pool level.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Falcone.
Yeah, just to hop on the sub pay pool, that is the crux of a lot of the heavy lifting that goes into this whole process, because that's when we normalize across a sub pay pool. So for instance, in cause IT, that would be at the 2-letter level. And then you can see the differences in writing styles. Also, if you have first time raters in the ACK demo system, sometimes they're not familiar with how to do the scoring. And that's where you can start making sure it doesn't get out of hand too quickly. And you do that normalization so that when you go to the pay pool level, it's a lot easier when you go across like all of LCMC and you have 200, 300, 400 folks to look at. It's a lot easier to do at a small level. And to have a senior functional that can say, hey, these are outliers. These don't look right. Let's, as a group, take a look and see what's going on here, either too low or too high. And if it's too low, also, is there a story there? Is there a troubled employee that we have to either help out, provide a plan for, or unfortunately, once in a while, eliminate? Over.
Yep. Thanks, sir. Mr. Leake.
So I think what's really important at the sub-pay pool level is it involves people who really understand both the positions and the people. So they're able to take the employee input, the supervisor input, and really evaluate that in context as part of the normalization. So at the sub-pay pool level, it's not simply a writing exercise of grading the compositions. It's really bringing in that full spectrum understanding of the employees, the missions, and the impacts to be able to evaluate them and put them in the right context of, and the right category of where their contributions fit relative to the overall workforce and to the structure of ACT Demo. So it's really a knowledge structure, not a writing structure. And the sub-pay pools are critical for bringing that knowledge into the pay pool process.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sowers?
Yeah, if I could just maybe give an example. We've talked about normalizing, and some people might not understand what that means. And to expand a little bit on what Mr. Leake said, the sub-pay pools are very familiar with the employees. They're also very familiar with the jobs. So if we have 3 people in the sub-pay pool that all hold a branch level financial management chief job, they'll know what the scope and the complexity, how many people they're supervising, what kinds of efforts. And when we normalize, we look to say, okay, all 3 of them have the same scope, the same kind of levels of complexity. What did they do as far as their contributions to make sure that somebody didn't give them a +5 because they may be new to ACT Demo and not quite understand what a +5 really means contribution based, and somebody else got a 0. So the sub-pay pool takes a close look at people who are have comparable jobs and levels of responsibility and complexity and says, based on the contributions, do the scores appear fair and normal? That was it. I just wanted to maybe give an example. Over.
Oh, thanks. That's very helpful. So let's move on to then the final part, which is the pay pool meeting. And can we discuss a little bit, Ms. Artuso, can you talk about how that pay pool meeting, who sits on that panel and how the meeting is conducted? Oh, come off mute.
Sorry. Normally the sub-pay pool panel chairs sit at the pay pool level, with the pay pool manager, so they can bring all of the knowledge and all of the discussions and to that main pay pool level to assist with that communication. So I think everybody's, described here, at the beginning from the contribution planning to the midterm to what the employee and supervisor needs to do to prepare both the sub-pay pool panel and the main pay pool to do that final closeout and to get to the stage where everyone agrees, have gone through the process and have discussed the contributions, the impact, and look, essentially what Ms. Sowers has just described, and really come to the final categorical rating, numerical rating, the pay pool score. And it's at the pay pool level then that you can see the results of all of that work, and then how that translates into the reward part of it, whether it's a cash award, whether it's a salary increase, and we also are incorporating, just like we did last year, time off awards. Now, time off awards are really tied to more of the performance level of the employee, where the cash and the salary increase is really the contribution side of it. So there's a little nuance there, but so it's at that pay pool level where all of that comes together, and all of the payout information is calculated, those compensation decisions are made, and then the system to process all of that, so the employee then sees the final rating and the payout from based on what they did.
Thank you. Ms. Sowers.
Yeah, just a little bit more of an example again. So in FM, I have 4 sub-pay pools. So when I explained that each one of the sub-pay pools does the normalization, they review the write-ups, as has been mentioned. If they see something they don't understand in a write-up from a supervisor, they'll call them and say, hey, this is what this says. You gave them this categorical score. We're trying to understand how it relates. So a lot of that quality checks are done at the sub-pay pool. I did say I have 4. So when they get to my level at the pay pool level, we're going to look at it again across all 4 pay pools, sub-pay pools, I'm sorry, to make sure that we're consistent. You know, you hear people say, well, was somebody a Santa Claus? You know, is everybody looking at it at the same time, from the same perspective? And before we even start the cycle, I meet with all my sub-pay pool managers. We talk about what we're looking at, making sure everybody's on the same sheet of music as far as how we're going to evaluate and run our sub-pay pools, so that when we get to the pay pool, we do the exact same thing. Now we have all of the employees, so now we're racking many more who are of the same level in complexity and scope and responsibility, and looking at how the scores are and how the write-ups are and the contributions to make sure that we have been consistent across the pay pool and check for accuracies and outliers.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I'd like to build off of what Steve and others have said, is that if the sub-pay pools don't do that normalization, the pay pools it's really, really hard, right? So it's so important that that's why it's a building block approach to get to the pay pool itself. Is there's a lot of hard and serious work done by supervisors, second level supervisors, the sub-pay pool managers, and ultimately getting to a pay pool discussion so we can make sure we are as fair as possible with our assessments, with the input we receive. And as Ms. Sauer said, it is not, it's done behind closed doors, but that's to maintain privacy, but it's not done without all the input that's necessary. If we feel at the pay pool we are missing it out, it is so important to know that we are doing everything we can to make sure we are doing that the sub-pay pool work, to know that everything is right, because in engineering we have over 2,000 employees in ACQ Demo and LCMC, and it's just so important to make sure that we are, and with so many variant scope of responsibilities for the same type of job title, that it's so important that the members of the pay pool, those sub-pay pool managers, their input is so valuable. And then we have to get back to the supervisor. It's not a one-time, we'll get in a room and leave. It's a machine that has to work together. And it's that building block approach that started all the way back to what we started this whole point with, which contribution planning. So it's all connected, and the pay pool is that culminating event.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Falcone.
Yeah, we talked about the similarities between sub-pay pools and pay pools. The difference in the pay pool, though, is that's when we actually use the budget. So we actually see actual salary increases, actual cash awards, time off awards. And then what we can do is with the sub-pay pools, we look at it, we can slice it and dice it a whole number of ways. We can look at NHO3s versus NHO4s. We can look at different bases compared one to the other to see if there are major differences, if one base is a stingy, Grinch, and the other's Santa Claus. And then we can look at the high payoff personnel and were they the top contributors in that whole pay pool. And then again, on the reverse side, we look at those who are not doing well at all and say, okay, what's the plan for these individuals? Let's get together. And if a local supervisor is running into problems, there's plenty of people in the pay pool that can help them out and say, hey, we've got a plan for them. How about doing this? How about doing that? Those types of things. and then if need be, check with the local EMR rep. So.
Thank you. Mr. Langang.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, a key takeaway I think that I want employees to have when they're hearing about this structure of ACK Demo is that they see that there are multiple layers of review, and that really lends itself to a lot of transparency within the organization. So you've got those supervisors initially who are making sure that the ratings make sense within their unit. You've got a sub-pay pool that's looking sort of across units or groups to make sure that all of the inputs make sense and aren't inflated or deflated, inappropriately at that level. And then that all culminates at that pay pool level, where you have very experienced senior folks taking a look at all of those inputs again and doing a review to make sure that that everything is in line and supportable. So, I think it was Mr. Fisher that made a comment that sometimes maybe employees can feel like, oh, this is just happening in a dark room somewhere. How fair is it? Well, the very structure of the process with all of those multiple reviews, those different panels culminating in that final pay pool, I really think ensure that transparency, multiple people looking at it multiple times.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Thanks. I just want to add to that. I think one of the real values of the pay pool itself is to ensure that all that the processes that we've gone through to assign the overall distribution score has the desired effect that we all want it to have. Because if we are not normalizing and having a process that does that quality check and normalization, we will have scores that get assigned that don't have the effect that we want, meaning giving the contribution score that actually delivers a pay raise or an award that's commensurate with that contribution to the mission. So that's why it's so important to have those discussions and do that, because otherwise, if you are out of whack with that, you will not have the effect that you want, and we will not get the right results back to the employees.
So we're coming near the end of our time, and before we close, I'd like to go around and just let you have the opportunity, if there's something that we missed and maybe a point that needs to be reemphasized or something that we've forgotten, please raise your hand and we can go around to cover that as well. And we'll start with Ms. Artuso.
Remember to get off mute this time. Yeah, I think I would want to say to the employees listening today that this is a very structured process, as everyone has, stated, and it's time consuming, which is a good thing. So the employees, they certainly have to take the time out to document and fully articulate what they've done throughout the year. Supervisors need to do the same. And the time and attention that the employee, the supervisor, our sub-pay pool panels, and our pay pool panels, they take this seriously and they dedicate the time. It is very time consuming, but it's well worth it. And I just wanted to state that to the employees that we do everything we can to make sure that pay pools, new panel members, new supervisors have the training, the tools, our business rules in advance. So that way, Mr. Fisher, as an example, can ensure that when he meets with his sub-pay pool or main pay pool panel members, that they understand the rules of engagement. So we're kind of level setting how the sub-pay pool panels operate. So I just wanted to share that with the audience.
Thank you. Mr. Fredericks.
I'd just like to build on what Ms. Artuso had to say, and this is a very good process, and people do put a lot of work in. But as an employee, if you want to succeed in this process, you need to be engaged. Can't emphasize that enough. You need to understand the process. You need to communicate throughout the year. You need to understand what the important missions are in your organization, and what to emphasize and what to tie your contributions to. So an employee who does those things will succeed in this system. Absolutely. Over.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Leake.
I just wanted to emphasize what Sherry and Tom said. This is a very structured process, but it's not a linear structure, and it's not something that gets done to the employees or to the workforce. This is meant to be a very interactive type of structure and process where the employees are very much engaged in a vital part of what's going on. So that continuous communication back and forth with the supervisor is critical to make this work, so that the information is not only well documented in the contribution plan, and the self-assessment and supervisor assessment, but that understanding has been transferred to the supervisor and to the sub-pay pool members to be able to advocate for the employee effectively as part of the structured process.
Thanks, sir. And Mr. Fisher.
I'd like to close by thanking the supervisors. It's a very hard job we've given them. They take on the responsibility of executing this system with the employees. They're the face of the program. I just get to represent them here today. And I would just say, if people want to be, participate more, I would ask them to aspire to be supervisors. And I just, again, to thank the supervisors.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sowers.
Yeah, Daryl, just to add to what everybody else has said, the people are the most important thing. I'm passionate about making sure our pay pool is run fair and equitable. My sub-pay pool managers are the same. When they come in, everybody has well documented what they did at their sub-pay pool. They bring in the stories, they bring in the circumstances, all of the things that were relayed to them during those sub-pay pools by the supervisors. I will say, as Mr. Fisher said, our supervisors have a tough job. They're carrying a lot of the weight here, but they all care about their employees. They want the system to be accurate and fair, and we want to compensate our employees. They're busting their butts, doing a great job for us and contributing to the mission, and that's what this is all about. So thanks for having us and giving us an opportunity to relay our thoughts. Thank you.
Ms. Moore.
Yeah, I would like to say, if anyone would like more information on this, this is a hard copy version, but this is available on the SharePoint site as well as the HCI DoD site. And since that's a shorter web address, I'm going to use that. It's https://acdemo.hci.mil. And this is a great overview of the things we talked about today in a really easy, readable format. It's digital online, obviously, but it goes over the pay pool cycle or the contribution cycle. There's also a glossary. It goes through all of the major milestones. There's even a page of how to read your appraisal. It's numbered, and then it tells you what that is, what does it mean, what am I looking at. And then there's also a glossary, like I said, and what's nice about this is that it has all of the career paths, factors and descriptors, discriminators, expected contribution criteria also in the back. So if anyone wants to have a nice overview or intro or maybe a refresher, or they're looking to get more information, I highly advise them to go online and check this out. It's under the training tab. It has a lot of great information in this. Over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think the major takeaway is know your impact, know your mission, and communicate often and frequently with your supervisor. And if you do that, then you can be engaged and be well served through the pay pool process. I appreciate everybody's time and helping us understand this better. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.